Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's much easier to cut it out than to
Yeah.
re-record it. I hear you.
Yeah. So I'm going to read a little line, like an intro line to the podcast, and then I'm just going to jump in and introduce you, and then I'll probably ask more about your background in the beginning, and then work into, okay, now you're in this role, like what specifically do you do, all that kind of stuff.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm going to kick us off here in three, two, one. Hi, and welcome to the Entrepreneur Strategies Podcast, where we teach you how to grow your wealth, health, and family well-being. Our podcast focuses on providing valuable insights, inspirations, and strategies to entrepreneurs and individuals passionate about business growth and success. And today, I am very excited to welcome Paul Barnhurst. He has named himself and coined himself the FP&A guy, and he is, if you look at his marketing and his websites, he's done a fantastic job of doing that. But Paul, I am so excited to learn a little bit more about what you do. You're in a related field, and I'm excited to hear some of your stories. So thanks for being on the show.
Mike, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, I'm curious. So let's first dive into what is FP&A.
Yep. So, FP&A, the acronym stands for Financial Planning and Analysis. And the way I like to describe it is most people know what an accountant or a bookkeeper is, right? They record history. They record what happened to make sure your financial statements make sense, make sure you have all your stuff for your taxes, whatever else you need. Your FP&A is about forward looking. It's about how do you spend that next dollar best. So FP&A is really what I would call a strategic advisor for the business that helps with the budgeting, helps with ad hoc analysis, and investment decisions.
Okay, great. And so tell me, as you are now in this role in financial planning and analysis, I'm just curious because, again, we're in related fields, and I went to college. I went to the University of Iowa and studied business and finance. How exactly do you get started in the financial planning and analysis? First of all, let's rewind actually to let's say high school. Were you always a numbers guy, or how did this play into your life?
Yeah, so I was always kind of what I'd call I was always a numbers nerd, but as a kid, I'll give the example because I think it's kind of funny. I was a huge Utah Jazz fan, and I loved reading box scores, statistics. I was the kid that could spout how many points John Stockton averaged, how many assists, all those little facts. So I'd read the box score every single day. I delivered a paper out every morning, or actually it was afternoon, but weekends was morning. I would open it up, read the sports section before I'd go out and deliver everybody's paper. And so when I was a kid, I always thought I was going to be a statistician just because I had paid attention to the box score. Took my first statistics class. I'm like, I'm not doing anything with statistics. But in high school, I got into business, competed in some business competitions. That's where the love of business came. I'd always the love of numbers was there. And really where I got into FP&A was after I went to grad school. In grad school, I switched to finance. I'd done a business undergrad in entrepreneurship. And then I had worked for a few years, went back to grad school and ended up doing finance. And then I came out and I've worked in finance ever since. That was 2008 when I graduated. And most of that time's been in FP&A.
Okay. And that was in college? Or
Yeah,
I'm sorry, that was at college, but which university did you go to?
So I did my undergrad at Brigham Young University. There I did a business management and entrepreneurship. And then I did grad school at the W.P. Carey, so Arizona State. I did an MBA in finance, and then I also did a Master of Science in Information Management. So I did a dual degree program while I was there.
That's amazing. And so when you entered college, did you got into business? But I mean, when did you start narrowing down that field and that path you were going to go down?
Yeah, really. So FP&A, I kind of fell into it. So business, I knew I wanted to do business from high school, but not necessarily finance. I had a couple business classes in high school. I wrote some business plans. I competed in a state and even a national competition for a business plan in high school. Wrote one about a shoe store and one about a computer store. And so I did two different ones, 2 different years. And so I always knew I wanted to do business, finished in entrepreneurship. And then at the time, the market wasn't very good. I was struggling to find a job. So I went to work for the government. out in California, outside Death Valley, actually, kind of middle of nowhere. And I was
Oh,
writing
wow.
contracts and pretty quickly realized writing contracts for the government just wasn't a good fit for me. The rules, the regulations. And so that's when I decided to go back to grad school. And so that's kind of where
Okay.
grad school comes in. Originally, when I started a grad with IT and kind of be a business analyst, deal with numbers and things. But I took my first finance class and I ended up switching to finance. I'd always enjoyed numbers, but when I took that, I just realized how much I was enjoying it and, switched to finance, and I've pretty much worked in finance ever since. So that was 2008 when I finished my MBA, and I
Okay.
worked in corporate America till, last year when I started my own business.
Okay. Great. Yeah. And when you said you worked in corporate America, what type of roles were you in corporate America?
Yeah, so they were, helping with budgeting and forecasting primarily, mostly, traditional FP&A roles. So supporting a VP. Example, the first one at American Express, I supported business travel. So the area I forecasted was all our supplier relationships for travel. So how much revenue are we getting from Delta? How much are we getting from Hilton? United. There are different contracts we had there, and I supported primarily Asia and Latin America during that time. And then from
Hmm.
there, I switched into a role where I supported actually prepaid products. So American Express, like Traveler's Check, gift cards, different things like that. Did that for a few years, and then left American Express and went into a role with a large company called Solera, that
Uh-huh.
where I managed a couple of the businesses around budgeting, forecasting. I did some revenue operation stuff as well, and just continuing to help maximize the P&L and the financials, helping them make those decisions for their businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. You know what I find so interesting in your story is very similar to a lot of small business owners. And I mean, you started off writing those couple of business plans and you entered into those competitions, and then you went off. You learned a little bit in school. You went off on your own, and then went back into the corporate route, right? And you probably extracted, when you're an entrepreneur, your path is always going to lead to running your own business, it seems. But there needs to be a start there. You need to be able to extract real life information, be able to process it, to be able to take it on your own, and be able to improve upon that. And I think that's so interesting. Your story kind of follows that same timeline. I'm probably willing to bet that even before high school, or maybe earlier in high school or previous, I bet you ran some sort of small business, whether he was even selling baseball cards on the corner or something along those lines. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Did
It
something related
actually
happen to you?
probably the closest I had was the paper route to kind of my
Okay.
own business type of thing that I did. Really, it's kind of funny. The bug didn't hit me till I wrote that first business plan, and then I just kind of fell in love with it. I'd given up the idea, to be honest, as I was working for Erica, going, "I'll probably never happen." I tried to apply for a bunch of small companies just to kind of get that experience, and I kind of fell into this business. It all started trying to find a job, and that led to one thing, which led to another. I could go into details of the whole story. It takes a few minutes, but basically that led to an opportunity coming up where one day I went to my significant other, my better half, and said, "Hey, I think there's enough here. I can start a business." She kind of gave me that look like, "Where'd this come from? Like, you're crazy." I'll probably get that look a
Yeah.
lot, but that's another story. And so then we talked about it for about 6 weeks after I'd brought it up. And I go, "I'm not going to start a business unless you're comfortable, right? This is something that's a family commitment. It's not like it's just about me here." And about 6 weeks later, she's like, "I'm good." I put in my notice that morning. So,
Wow. Yeah. And it's really funny because I have a same story. And I'm glad you added in that piece about getting the buy-in from your spouse, your significant other, because that is, sort of the premise of the show. Really, it has to be a decision among the family, because it's a very important decision. There's a lot of risk in jumping out and starting your own business. There's a lot that can happen that'll impact everybody, and so you do need to have that buy-in. And I remember, just even from my own story, I was working for larger investment brokerages, and I was just sort of miserable there at the end, and I knew it wasn't going down the path that I wanted. I wanted to work with small business owners, and I remember having that conversation with my wife, and saying, "Look, I think I need to start this on my own." There's going to be a lot in this. We could, quite frankly, be completely broke. That's the risk that's in there. And then it was that a sort of a 3-month ramp way of planning and preparing for that to happen. So I know exactly the feelings that you went through, and I applaud you for, running that by the family first. And
Yeah,
so
no, definitely.
tell me what those first months. Tell me what those first months were like when you started your business. How did you already have the entire infrastructure set up, or was it kind of building the airplane as it's flying?
Of course, a little bit of building the airplane as it's flying. So I'll go back and tell you a little bit kind of what I had in place. So my journey started with LinkedIn, basically. And I started to build a little bit of following, trying to find some job. I started a website about Excel, Microsoft Excel, thinking I would do something kind of there just on the side. And then what happened is I was looking for a new job again. And I reached out to a couple software tools. And I had applied for some jobs with them. And so I posted things on LinkedIn about them. And what happened is when I posted about these tools, all of a sudden everybody started messaging me, asking me if I would look at their tool. I said, okay, something's here. I'll try to, build on that. I think my following was 4,000. And so then that led to somebody reaching out and going, hey, we'll pay you to do some advertising on LinkedIn. I think I had a following of like 5,000 at the time. So it was tiny. And then in 1 week, 3 different vendors, 2 of them offered me a job and another wanted to do a collaboration in the space. Around the same time, someone asked me to do some Excel training, and another person had a consulting gig. And so that's kind of where it started. And I just started running with it with just that, thinking, okay, it's probably going to be about 50% consulting. I'll do a little bit of training and what I call some influence marketing as I build out my audience. It's turned out the consulting today is less than 5% of my business. Probably it might be 3% of my revenue this year, 3-4%.
Okay.
Really small. It ended up being a lot more on the influence marketing and training. And so I kind of figured out as I went. The one thing I had in place is I had a podcast where I had a premier sponsor. So there was some built-in revenue every month. So that really helped to kind of lay that groundwork from day one. I also had a consulting gig that was about 15 hours a week. That lasted a few months, and I realized it just didn't make sense. I had better opportunities elsewhere. So that's kind of how it started, and I'm still figuring it out as I go. Mm-hmm. What makes sense, what opportunities. The biggest challenge on the business front is learning to say no, because there's more opportunities than there is time in the day. And I'm still not great at that. I got to improve.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I've gone through that experience myself, and it's processes and workflows. And as I sit here on my desk, I have little notes here. One of them is this a workflow? Should it be? Can I automate it? I've got the 3 things that I should be keeping as my priority every single day, which is planning work, meaning like client work, education, furthering my education to be the best that I can be in my industry, and then marketing for my business. And if it's not those 3, then it says automate, eliminate, delegate. Do I stick to that all the time? Probably not, but I try to. And it's important as a small business owner to be able to protect our time, because we're stretched so thin as it is. So our resources are should be spent in very particular areas. One thing I'm very, very curious on, because you've done such an awesome job on it, is I did a little bit of research about you looking online. You have done an awesome job with your personal brand. As you talked about influencer marketing or influence marketing. Have you always been cognizant? Because I feel like a lot of business owners don't realize how important the personal brand is until later, or almost when it's too late, like they're behind the market. And so I think it's very intuitive of you, because you got into sort of that personal brand at an early stage, it seems like. So tell me how you intuitively knew that this influence marketing personal brand was so important to your business.
Funny enough, it really came naturally. I never thought my business would be influence marketing. Really what happened is, and I'll tell a little bit more of the backstory, it's really started about 7 years ago now, 2016, looking for a job, reached out to a guy by the name of Ken Fick and said, hey, if you give me 30 minutes of your time, I'll give you a Starbucks gift card. The guy's like, I don't want a Starbucks gift card. He's like, I want you to write an article for my website. And I remember thinking, I suck at writing, but okay, I'll write an article for your website. Wrote it, found I kind of enjoyed it. He liked it. He's like, hey, I'll give you $100 if you write me another one. He was running his own business and so was looking for content. And so I did a couple more. Those started to do well on LinkedIn. And so I started to just build a brand from that. And the brand was more about getting a job. No idea that I would start a business with it. That really wasn't the thought at all. And so that led to on LinkedIn, which led to opportunities to be on a couple webinars. And it organically built from that. And, today I have a following of 80,000. So from the beginning of the business,
Wow.
the brand was key to the business. And so the FP&A guy was just a hashtag I used one day, and it ended up sticking. It wasn't, I didn't plan on that being my logo or the business or any of that. The business name I had was called Excel Reviews. My website that I was doing some Excel stuff on was what I think excelreviews.net. And so it really kind of just naturally and organically built out. But what I realized, particularly around software, is that I came in at a time when the market was exploding. And so I was getting CEOs reaching out to me on a weekly basis, wanting to show me their tool. And so I said, okay, there's something here. I can differentiate. Nobody else is doing it. And it's allowed me to substantially grow my brand and build in a way that I would have never imagined. And so I just doubled down and really focused on that, realizing that would drive revenue.
Yeah, that's great. And before we get into what you do specifically for companies, because I think this is going to be really great for small business owners to hear and business owners in general, because the modeling and the projecting of your finances out into the future is extremely important. And I think too many times business owners think that it's just it's like building a resume, right? It's not. It's all like fictitious, or not necessarily fictitious, but it's all hope. It's all like emphasizing something that may not be. But I think you're going to have a different spin on it, and I think it can be very accurate if done correctly. But before I get into that, I am very curious about BYU in particular, because the amount of very successful people, particularly in the tech industry, but in general, that have come out of the BYU Business School is it's crazy. I mean, there's been so many people that I've come across that are very highly successful that have come out of that business program. So I'd love for you to shine a little bit of light on that and what that experience was for you. And do you really attribute a lot of your success to the BYU Business School?
So, I mean, I think my experience at BYU was great, but I think a lot of that success goes a little further back than BYU, because most of the people who attend BYU are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. One of the things most members do is they serve a 2-year mission. I think a lot of the success, if you ask most of them, comes from that experience. Take religion out of it altogether. I know we don't want to discuss that, but here's what happens. You go out, pay your own way for 2 years. You're getting up at 6 or 6:30 every morning, going to bed at 10, living with somebody you never even knew till all of a sudden that you were told, hey, this is your partner, and you're together 24 hours a day with one purpose. You're serving people, teaching people, helping people. You have very rigid schedules. You're studying every day. And so there's a tremendous amount of discipline, a tremendous amount of relationship, a tremendous amount of good study habits that you gain from that. And then you go to college. And so I think that framework, if you look at most of those very successful people that went to BYU who have also done the church, I think if you ask them, they'll say that is as big a part as the university education in that success. Like you see people who go to West Point or military, they learn a lot of great discipline and skills, and they're often highly successful.
Yep. Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I'm not a member of the church, but one of the things that, I'm here in Salt Lake City as well. And so,
sure,
there's a presence here. And that is one of the things that I admire the most about that experience and it just makes sense, really. And I think, that's sort of what people are trying to accomplish with this gap year, right? They go to high school and then they take a gap year before they go to college because people are starting to realize that life experience is equally as important as what the education that you're learning, maybe even more so. Yep. And the fact that the church teaches people to go out, they have basically a sort of a business model, right? It's not necessarily door-to-door sales, but I think the biggest reason why business owners are not successful is because of fear. They're afraid of putting themselves out there. And already before you even get into college, people have to get over that fear because you are knocking on strangers' doors. And again, you're right. You're living on your own. You have to figure out how to get around the world. You have to figure out how to get along with a roommate that you may not have even known prior to that. There's so much you can learn from that experience. And I do think that it, as to your point, sets people up for success. And if that's something that I can instill in my kid to be able to put himself out there and to let go of fear,
Mm-hmm.
then I think he'll be so much more successful in life. So yeah, I 100% agree with you there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, even going back, as a kid, I gave my first talk. It was at church, but it was in front of a few hundred people at the age of 12. At the age, I think I was 17, I might have just turned 18. I spoke in front of 2,000 people, right? You generally
Mm-hmm.
don't get those opportunities as a teenager. And so it helps you just get comfortable being in front of others and eliminates a lot of that fear. It's why you see so many people who come back after that, BYU students in particular, they do door-to-door sales for a summer because they can make really good money because they're already
Yeah,
comfortable talking to people and there's a lot of translatable skills.
yeah, yeah. And all of that has set you up for the success that you have today. So what I really want to know, and I think what the business owners who listen to the show are really going to love is the financial piece to it, and maybe breaking that down into a way that's a little bit less intimidating for business owners, and in particular, how maybe what you do could help teach maybe their CFO or their controller or their operation, whoever's doing the financial forecasting for them. What are some of the most critical elements of FP&A, financial planning and analysis, for companies?
Yeah, so I think particularly small companies, where it usually starts is helping them actually budget, right? Many small companies don't build a budget. In fact, many small companies don't even look at their financials regularly, right? They're disconnected from that, just think, okay, well, a lot of revenue's coming in and not even realizing how much they spend. So, obviously accounting can help some with that, but FP&A, particularly when you bring in, often with a small company, you'll bring in advisory services, somebody part-time, whether they call themselves a fractional CFO or FP&A advisory or whatever. They're doing a mix of roles, including within that is first helping with that budget and forecast. Where do you want to grow? Where do you want to go? How do you want to grow? Especially for fast-growing businesses, because right, the biggest challenge a fast-growing business has is cash. It's not, you can show accounting revenue, but often you're waiting for that cash, and a profitable business can go under because they're not managing their cash flow. So I think that's one thing they, really help with is you set up that budget and think about, okay, where do I need to be in a year? What's the best way to get there? And the way I like to explain it is, the FP&A person beyond the budget is really there to bring a financial lens to your decisions, to make sure you're optimizing that investment. Because if you don't have someone financial in the room, often you may think it's a good investment. But have you really looked at the data? Have you really thought through it all financially and captured those different elements? And so they can really help you grow your business and just make sure you're doing it in a smart way. So your expenses aren't outgrowing your revenue, as an example, which often happens. That can happen short term, happens too often, you go under.
Yeah, and I see it all the time, and even from personal experience, even as a financial planner myself, and I'm more a certified financial planner working with business owners, but how that relates to them on the personal side.
Yep.
One of the things that you do is really help them on the business side, how they can grow it. And I think too often when businesses start off and they start to have some success, they try and grow too fast, and they figure the answer to their problem is to spend more and more and more, and that's not always the case. I can imagine you might agree with that.
No, I 100% agree. You can almost, you really can't spend your way to success, just like you can't cut your way to success, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has to be smart. You got to be spending the dollars smart. There's nothing wrong with spending if you're sure the return's going to be there. But have you actually done the homework? And often, no, it's just a wish and a prayer. Like I heard someone say, how did they say it? Something like, unqualified strategy is just, is wishful thinking. Basically, if you don't really have a qualified strategy, it's just wishful thinking. And that's often what it is.
What are some of the predictive calculations that they should be running really to figure out if the balance sheet is currently healthy and if it's sustainable 5 years down the road?
Well, So I think there's, a few things. Obviously, start with the short term. I think having a 13-week cash flow is really good. Then you build
Mm-hmm.
out the current year. Going out 5 years is a little high level. So really, when I think of planning, it starts generally the way I think of it is you have your strategic and long range planning, and that's done at a high level. Where do we want to go? Making sure your thoughts around the financials align with the strategy. From there, you typically build that budget out a year, maybe 2 years, depending on the company, and you make sure it's aligned with that strategy. And then, finance helps filter it down. And so I think having that plan and that idea where you go isn't about being right, because anyone who's forecasted is wrong, and they're wrong almost all the time. As I heard it
Mm-hmm.
said, all models are wrong, some are useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's about it being useful, right? If you don't plan, the famous quote, if you don't plan, plan to fail.
Yeah.
And so planning
Exactly.
is really about putting it down on paper and having the idea and the strategy of how you're getting there and aligning it so everybody can work toward a target than necessarily about hitting a certain number.
Okay. Okay. And so, for a company that's scaling, let's say they've gotten to the point where they're 20, 30 employees. Maybe they're even starting to take some venture capital money or some seed money to try and get to that next level. What advice would you give those companies in that moment?
I think the biggest advice is don't try to grow at any cost. Economics apply all the way along. Make sure you're looking at those. I would say you should have a fractional CFO in there that's helping you at that point. If you've hit those type of numbers, and that's somebody who understands FP&A and may also help with fundraising. But make sure you're you're growing at a healthy rate. Don't just pour the cash on and think, okay, we'll fix it all later. Because what happens, we've looked at so many businesses that billions of dollars have been spent. They've grown really big, but have never turned a profit. Often the investors win in that situation, but from an economic standpoint, value is not created. And even a greater number never even get to that level of success. They go under because of that. But even the ones that
Mm-hmm.
have success generally aren't creating true value. They don't have a profitable P&L. They're still hoping to get there sometime in the future.
Yeah, yeah. And so these companies, during those moments, do you serve as that fractional CFO, or how specifically do you work with those companies?
Yeah, so for me, like example, I'm working with a company today. One of the things I'm doing is I'm helping them update their model. So I helped them a year ago build out a model. They were struggling to tell the board where they were going to go. So we built a detailed model for them, a 3-statement model, helped it, and then gave it to them so they could use it to better forecast. It was a time of, there was a lot of inflation issues. There was a lot of pricing challenges. They really were struggling. They had a lot of unprofitable products, trying to figure out where they were going. And so we built out this detailed model. And I still remember the guy who I did the model for. He told me that made a huge difference for the business. It allowed them to help the board realize the areas they were struggling, the changes that needed to be made. They've made those changes. They're much more profitable today. And now I'm working with them again to update the model. So that's one example of something I've done with a client. Another one, I came in and did it. This one I did an assessment of their tools. They were a little bigger and gave them some advice on how they should think about some of their data. I mean, other ones, I did a lot of analysis. They had really poor insight to their customer churn. And so I did a
Mm.
lot of analysis to help them understand why their customers were churning and to give them some thoughts, looking at different programs and analyzing their data. So it varies what I'm brought in to do. Since I don't do a ton of consulting, I don't get in as much to that typical fractional CFO. But if you're a fractional CFO long term for a company, you're generally helping with budgeting and forecasting, ensuring smart investment decisions are made, and then fundraising when and if that needs to happen, which is often a part of those fast growing companies.
Yeah, yeah. And this is really great information. I think a lot of business owners should be looking at their future models, where they're heading. And what I find interesting in this is, even though you're a numbers guy, it almost sounds like you're a bit of a not only CFO but a CEO, because really the numbers, for instance, like attrition, and then not just telling them, hey, you've got too much attrition, this isn't going to be sustainable for the long term. But from those numbers, you're able to kind of give them a reason why. And so it sounds like there is that crossover into the, not just the finance world, but the business world, and actually helping them solve the problem, not just solve the numbers, but solve the actual issue at hand.
That's definitely where FP&A has gone in the last decade. It used to be, I would call it FP&R, financial planning and reporting, right? Mm-hmm. Governance, a lot more control. CFOs today, it's a much more modern and also FP&A. What you're seeing is a shift. Historically, almost every CFO came from an accounting background. Now it's like, I think 40 or 50% of new CFOs last year came from FP&A primarily. And that's continuing to grow. I know of multiple people that have predicted the next few years, we'll see the majority of CFOs coming from FP&A. And so FP&A, really, yes, it is a strategic. I like to think of us as almost consultant or value creator. I heard somebody say who came from FP&A and went on to be a CEO. He's like, I very much need FP&A in the room as I'm making decisions because they're the only one outside of the CEO and the CFO that has a 360 view of the business. Head of sales doesn't, head of operations. We work with all the different groups and we also get to see the financials. So it's really important that we understand the operations and how the business works because we're really supposed to partner there and help ensure that smart decisions are being made. That's what kind of best in class FP&A is. That's what you should be getting when you get advisory services. I always tell small companies, if you have a bookkeeper that's telling you they're giving you advisory services and charging you for it, and all you're getting is your financials and a couple sentences about what happened, then you probably need to go back to them and ask for more or find somebody different. Because they really should be able to ensure you're help ensure, not make, funding board that you can go to for advice. We're not the ones making the decision, but often we're looked to offer advice and thoughts.
Yeah. There's a few important things that I got out of that. For one, what's great about what you're doing is it's similar to when I read books, right? And it's broad concepts. And they say, by the end of it, you read this book and you think, all of that was amazing. I need to do all those things. But then you go, how specifically do I do those things? So you're not only just telling them the broad picture, this is what's happening within your company, but this is how you solve that. This is what you do. And additionally, I just had a home inspector on the last episode, and he was talking about how emotional the process can be in real estate. And what he does is he's just presenting the numbers. There's no emotion attached to it. Now, everybody does attach emotion to it, but really, these are just the facts. I'm just presenting facts, and you're the ones who's determined how to emotionally react to that. And so that's exactly what would happen without an FP&A person in the room, say in a boardroom with a large company trying to figure out, how to solve problems. Every one of those department heads has got a very emotional attachment involved in their parts of it. And so if you blame sales is going to have a very emotional reaction regarding it. And so that's why it's important, I think, to have an FP&A guy in the room who's an unemotional participant in the process. And you're able to say, hey, look, I've got, none of this has to do with me. I'm just showing you what's wrong and let's find a solution. Yep. And that probably helps companies, get to the root of that faster because everyone else has a very emotional tie-up into their specific part of the process.
Yep, and I can share kind of two examples. One, I still remember I had a guy on my podcast. He'd been a CFO, spent a lot of time in FP&A, and he had read an article about what a CEO wants from a CFO. And number 2 on the list, and this applies to FP&A as well, is dispassionate, hard-headed analysis. And the idea wasn't that, wanted you to be stubborn. It was remove emotion, give me the facts, and defend that position. And that's what we're looked for, and we're looked as a partner. I can remember being in the room one time and being asked by a group of people, I was in with product and sales, and I think there's some marketing people in the room, and we were working on a new pricing package for this product rollout. And someone looked at me and goes, "What should the price be?" And, my response was, it's not my job to set the price. I need to make sure the margins are right. You know the customer better. You marketing, sales, product. You guys should tell me what makes sense. I can give you my thoughts based on what I know of the market. I had been working there for, a number of years, and I shared my thoughts around the price, and we came to an agreement. And to me, that's where FP&A should be, is that advisor. There shouldn't be the one, making the decisions for the business, but helping to guide and be protective as best they can. The smart decisions are made. Obviously, wrong decisions are made, and sometimes FP&A supports those, right? Nobody bats 1,000. But if you're looking at data, if you know the business well and you're communicating with the right people, you're going to make better decisions on average.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. And so as the FP&A guy is moving forward, so let's flip the script a little bit. Where is the FP&A guy going? Where is the future of the FP&A guy's business?
Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities figuring that out. I would say I want to continuing to do more training. I do corporate training, so financial modeling, FP&A, data visualization. So that's one area. Second, beyond the training and continuing to grow that, is podcasts. I love bringing on guests. I just created a second podcast called Financial Modelers Corner. And I'll share just a few of the things because I think you'll appreciate these that we've had. Like our second guest we had on the show, I think it was second or third, 2-time world champion in Excel modeling. Bet most people didn't know you can actually watch that on ESPN.
I had no idea.
Yeah, so I interviewed the guy. Just fascinating.
Yeah.
So that's one for you. Another one, okay. I just interviewed my last episode, 3 guys that have been modeling for 40 plus years. One of them's in his 80s. He tells the story his first financial model he built was 1978 on a mainframe with punch cards using a coding called Prosper. In the middle of the night, they would rent it out from the bank in South Africa. Middle of the night because it was cheaper. So he'd go in after midnight till morning. And he took that to the investment committee, and they didn't believe it was possible that he could have built a 3-statement model using a mainframe when he was trying to get funding. And so he tells that story. And so that's one thing I'm really continuing to grow is the podcast side, because I love talking to people. I love hearing their stories and just getting that opportunity to chat with them. So that's one area. And then in addition to that, I have a few other projects I'm working on. There's a community thing that I'll be announcing soon that's still kind of in the final stages, and some other opportunities. I do a lot around software and some research there. So still figuring out exactly where I'm going to go long term, but definitely have some some areas I'm looking to grow and kind of continue to expand.
Well, on theme with the show, as you're looking to grow and there's all these different opportunities, I got to imagine, because in the very beginning of the show, you mentioned how important your family is for passing decisions by your spouse. How can you help inspire other business owners in how to scale in the way that you have and created such an amazing personal brand? And by the way, you are very good at podcasting because you're quite easy to talk to. How does you make sure that this doesn't cross over into spending too much time in the business and not in the other important areas of your life, like spending time with your family?
It's definitely hard. So one of the things I do, I'm a grinder by nature. I've always been the type that can work 16 hours a day, which isn't healthy. Totally recognize that. So a few things I do, and I've had better periods than others, but I've done pretty good since I started the business. Had a few months where I didn't, but try to exercise every day. Second thing is, I'm fortunate. I have a daughter that has a lot of activities, and due to some family reasons, I get to take her to all of those. So I start very early in the morning, and I'm almost always done with work by 5 p.m. That allows me to take her to her tutoring, her horse lessons, all the different things we do. I have something almost every day of the week. So for me, unfortunately, I sacrifice a little more sleep than I should, but I make sure that my evenings are there so I can do those things with her. and, try to put that emphasis on the family. I mean, I take her to school every day. I pick her up, those type of things. And it's really tough. Lately, I've been thinking, okay, how can I, scale back a little bit? I'm at that point where I'm like, okay, when do I bring in a virtual assistant? How many hours? Can I afford it? All those fun things that come with scaling a business. And, there's no manual that says, yep, at $325,000 in revenue, you should hire a virtual assistant, right? It's different for everybody and what you're doing are 150. And so those are some of the things I'm struggling with, but I try to do. I really try to put family first. I try to exercise every day. Like I've done it 4 times this week. I did it 5 times last week. Good. And then make sure I'm there for my daughter in the evening and my wife.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. What you mentioned is, and you alluded to earlier in the show, is learning to say no. I think that's step number 1. I struggled for a long time with the virtual assistant role. I happen to have an assistant now, but it's a very tough decision because it is different for everybody. But the fact is, you recognize how important family is, and so that's already consideration in your mind. And I love how you make it non-negotiable after 5 o'clock. You are spending that time with your family, and that's where the learning to say no comes in. And being strict about that. 5 o'clock is designated for family, and I think you're doing an excellent job. I mean, you've done a wonderful job scaling your business. You are mindful of the other pieces that are very important in your life. You're making an effort. So I applaud you, and I'll tell you, I really appreciated this conversation today. I learned a lot. It's interesting as a financial planner, but more on the sort of the individual side of being a business owner. I learned a lot about the analysis that goes into larger companies and everything that they need to consider. And honestly, I'm going to be honest, I did not know the FP&A role even existed. This is the first time I'd heard it. I certainly didn't know about it as I was in college and coming out. But
I didn't either in college. I fell into it because it was an opportunity to get a promotion. FP&A. That's how I fell into it. I'm like, oh, you're going to pay me more? I'll apply for the role.
Yeah. Well, it's worked out for you clearly. And so, and I think it's a very vital piece to any corporate or company's health, particularly when they're scaling. And being able to have that unemotional person in the process that can say, hey, this is what the numbers are showing. These are some things that you should consider. And it's really, really important in that growth stage. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, somebody's listening to the show, they have, 30, 40 employees, and they're really, they're considering that next stage of growth, and they just need somebody to come in and really help them understand what they have and where they're going. How could they reach out to you?
Yeah, so the best way to reach out to me, I'll give a couple ways. One, LinkedIn. Anyone can find me there. I'm on LinkedIn daily. My website, thefpnaguy.com. You can contact me through there. Somebody wants, they're also... Sorry, go ahead.
LinkedIn, are you Paul Barnhurst, or are you?
I am Paul Barnhurst, but the tag on my address is the FP&A guy. If you were just to look it up by the address, but if you type in Paul Barnhurst, you'll find me on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy to find me. There's not a lot of Paul Barnhursts.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and I can send you that link for your show notes. And then, like I said, the website is thefpnaguy.com, or as some people like to say, I've heard it called the F Panda Guy or the Effin' Panda Guy. I've been called both. I have a T-shirt that says F Panda, and it shows a panda, because that's what people think about if they have no idea what FP&A is when they see it. So those are ways they can find me. If people want to listen to any of my work, they can find my podcasts on Spotify, on Apple, on any of those channels, FP&A Today and Financial Modeler's Corner.
Okay. Perfect. Well, and if you guys look it up too, you'll see the personal brand that I'm talking about. He's got a cartoon character of his face with a big long beard. If you're only listening to this, he's got a magnificently long beard, and his personal brand really emphasizes that. So today has been really great. I really appreciate you being on the show, and I can't wait to listen to your show. And I know a lot of my listeners will really enjoy reaching out to you. So I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. And, thank you for your audience for listening to this. And it's just been a real pleasure to be here with you. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's fun to be on the other side of the mic.
That's right. Yeah. I always enjoy it too. All right, Paul. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.